Hello, everyone, and welcome to the IABC Circle of Fellows, episode 129. We're really adding a lot of. Today is a special day because you get a chance to meet IABC's newest fellows, at least 3 of the 5 new fellows, and episode 130, which will be coming your way a little bit later with Shell Holtz, brings you the other 2 fellows. But I'm pleased to have Cyrus Mavalwala with me, Diana Degan, and Oberholzer. And what I'd love to do is let each one of you just say hello and introduce yourself, where you're coming from, and maybe that's off to a great start. So, Cyrus, why don't you take lead off?
Sure. Thank you, Brad. Great to be here. Cyrus Mavalwala, CEO of Advantis Communications, been running Advantis for about 24 years, and we work with a lot of local governments, B2B organizations in US and Canada, and sometimes in the UK and abroad. And IBC has been a big part of my life since 1995. So there's lots of stories we can talk about.
And over to you, Andre.
So good evening, Brad, from South Africa, and to everyone watching this. I head up corporate affairs, as we call it, which is everything almost A to Z in communications for my company, SAPI. We're a big pulp and paper manufacturer globally with head offices in South Africa. And I suppose I started out in the foreign service, then transitioned into the corporate world. And it's coming on to about 40 years that I've been working and earning a living.
And it also looks as if we are in World Cup season as it's being recorded, and I'm seeing some colors that are definitely World Cup.
Indeed, I had to wear the flag. The team won last night, so we're into the knockout stages, and in fact, we're playing against Canada, so yes. It's going to be interesting.
Yeah. Let's go over to Diana. Good day.
Hello from Guelph, Ontario. So I've been in the industry coming on 35, I guess it's 35 years now. Because as everybody else, we all started so very young in our careers. I'll be celebrating 25 years running my own practitioner as being a solo practitioner as of August, Diana Degan and Associates. And for the past 7 years, I have primarily been focusing on teaching at Conestoga College in Kitchener, which I have absolutely loved. But so that has been my focus for the past 7 years, but I have continued also to work with a number of different clients as well.
Yeah, well, when we come to talking a little bit about that next generation stuff, you probably have some great stories to be able to tell and some insights that we'd love to look at. But let's start with a question about, maybe what's that best piece of communication advice that was ever given to you and at some point in your career, whether you were just starting or a little bit later on. And anybody can jump in, and you don't have to come to me for the next one.
Maybe let me start. I suppose it's from one of the CEOs that in fact, I'm still working with him, but just a lesson from him. And it's about, taking care with language. Words matter. And, English is a rich language. If you communicate in English, there's lots of words to use. They have nuances and meanings. And you shouldn't be afraid to express yourself clearly by using not just, 10 to 15 words for everything you want to say. And I think so. I always take care, whether it's speeches or anything else that a person writes, that you try and use language which appeals to the audience, but which also gets across the nuance of what you're trying to say.
Words do matter.
I'm going to jump in and add to that, because I was actually sitting here thinking, what was the best piece of advice I actually got from somebody? And I'm having a really hard time actually thinking about that. And then I'm actually connecting back to something that I actually learned from my mom as a teenager, who actually said to me, be very careful about what you put into writing and you share with others. And I'm actually going to go back and say, I was going through a breakup with a boyfriend, and I wanted to put down everything that I was feeling in a letter and send it off to him. And she said, don't do that, because those thoughts are going to live on, and you may regret very much what you're thinking at that time, and don't want those words to live on. And you know what? I have always thought about that in everything that I have done moving forward in this career and in this industry, about what we put into writing, and whether that is a news release, whether that is a white paper, whether that is a speech that that I'm writing for somebody, that those words, and especially nowadays where everything goes into the internet and does live on forever. And those are what I tell my students, that nowadays everything will live forever. So my mother was right, mom is always right.
Yeah,
right?
mothers are always right. And it's interesting. I think I'm in the same camp as you, Diana, where it wasn't so much told, but what I picked up in my first agency job was, you need to always think 2 steps ahead, not just one, but you need to be farther down the road than anyone else in that room. And then you can, do your job very well. And I learned that because she would ask questions in our weekly meetings, and I'd be like, oh, didn't think of that. Oh, darn, I didn't think of, and then so after a while, it's like, okay, I'm going to prepare. And how do I prepare? I'm going to think about the questions she's going to ask. I'm going to think about why she's asking those questions. So I think that's great advice. And I kind of translated that when I was in that same job of, not how do I get to the next level and the next promotion, but what do I need to do to be seen as ready to get 2 promotions? So kind of 2 levels up. And I think if you always kind of have that mindset of going that extra mile and being a little more into the future, I think that's always a good thing, regardless of the situation.
I think maybe, Brad, to add on to what Diana said, is I've always told my staff, is something I apply for myself, is the best emails you write are the ones that you write in the heat of the moment, and then you immediately press the delete button, because then it's out of your system, and then you can actually sit and provide measured response. But I've always said to them, sit at your keyboard, type away like crazy, say everything you want to say, read it, then delete it, and then actually write the real email.
If you don't mind, I'm just going to add one more thing based off of what Cyrus was just saying, because I actually do remember one of the owners of one of the agencies. It was an integrated marketing communications agency, and we did full-blown everything, basically. And I was as an account person, I was actually doing advertising and marketing and everything. It wasn't just, say, public relations and communications. And I had a very difficult client that I was working with, that everybody hated working with. And I remember saying to the president of the company, why are they like this? Why are they looking at everything every single time I go in there? And on the one hand, it ended up being that I had to learn everything very, very well. I had to learn the budgets. I had to learn the creative. I had to learn the production. I had to learn everything, because I didn't know what I was going to get grilled on when I went into a meeting with that client. And the president of the company had said to me, you have to remember that you are the most fun that they are going to have on any given day. The rest of their day is going to be P&L, so, profit and loss statements. It is going to be the very dry stuff of a product manager's piece of business or the sales guy's piece of business. You were bringing to them the fun stuff in their life. You were bringing to them the creative stuff. You were bringing them the promotions. You were bringing them the PR. You were bringing them the communication stuff. That is why they are so heavily wanting to be involved. And I'll never forgotten that, because that was really, truly the essence of what we do. We are bringing in the really good stuff for what a lot of our clients are getting to do in their daily lives. And that is why they are going to be so actively involved in everything that we do.
Well, you've hit upon a great one, Diana, in talking about someone who gave you some counsel, a mentor, a colleague, a leader, a client. Can you think of others? I mean, Cyrus and Andre, maybe someone who had a profound influence on your development, and what did they teach you? I mean, that's sort of, we don't have to name names, but.
You know, I'll say it wasn't a person, but it was a community, and it was 30 years ago, I think exactly 30 years ago, from 2026, where I volunteered for my first IABC conference. And the impact of all these people, hundreds of people that I had never met before, were from various countries around the world and across Canada. They were all so welcoming and warm, and this contagious energy kind of took over. And after that conference ended, I had never experienced anything like that in my career before. And after that conference ended, I just knew IABC was the place for me. So I you know, it really wasn't one person, but it was the ability for all these people to be warm and welcoming and break down barriers so quickly that really changed my path for the better, I think.
I think for me, it was a few individuals, senior people that I worked with at the time. I was fortunate enough to be able to work with people at the executive level, whether in government or in the private sector. I suppose it's seeing their big picture thinking, how they didn't compartmentalize things, didn't look at things in a tactical way. I think that helped make sure that you started to adopt that as well. And to Cyrus's point is when you join a voluntary organization like IABC and you start engaging with people from different backgrounds who are all focusing in the same professional area, but then you actually realize how little you know about so much, and how much you can learn from all of these colleagues and friends.
I think that's great. I'll throw in one that I got hit early on in my career, which was sort of like people are asking this question. We need to do something. Let's get out a release. Let's do this. And my manager sort of like, slow down. Let's not overreact. It's almost back to what you said, Andre, is write it and then he delete it. But it was like let's do a little bit more homework and find out how widespread is this? How far do we need to go? Who do we need to communicate to? Is this really the fire that you think it is, or are you being misled? So all great lessons that I think stand a test of time. And I sort of hate to think of adding up the years that all of us have been in the profession in this group, or let alone all the IABC fellows, because it's probably in a lot of digits. But I wanted to ask about what you've seen change over the time that you've been in the profession, because there has been a lot of change, but also what has remained constant, because there are some things that, early lessons are just as valid today. So are there things that you've seen that have really changed the way we go about doing what we do in organizational communication, and some things that haven't changed?
It's really interesting, because for everything that everybody says, this has really changed, that has really changed. And I have sat through a lot of boardroom meetings where a lot of agencies have come in and said, this is the latest thing and this is what we're doing now. And I remember sitting there going, that's integrated marketing. That is not new. We've been doing that for a while. I literally have sat through, I don't know how many of these types of presentations, and thought, no, we've been doing that for a while, right? It's just a new name, on something else, and maybe where you have been, you just have not done it that way before. Or you have not, so many, places have just worked in their silos and just have never touched those types of things before. And if you're new to something and have not done it yourself, or have not put yourself out there to try different things, and made yourself learn and evolve, which I think should be the goal of all of us, to learn and evolve, and to move forward. Not to steal your catch points, which I know is something that Cyrus is very involved in as well. Because for me, I've always been a lifelong learner. And I try very hard to constantly keep learning and keep moving forward, so that I know where I need to move. And AI has certainly been one of those things, because I got smacked in the face with it by my students in the classroom. And we can talk about that more. But I think for a lot of us, AI has been the more recent one that we've all had to try to figure out what that meant and how we need to deal with that.
Yeah, you bring up some interesting points, Diana, because AI, I think, to your question, Brad, AI has, I think, increased, and a number of things around the world have just increased the pace of change. So I think there is now constant change, and that's, kind of the new normal. That's what we're living in. I think that has honestly changed from, let's say, a decade ago. But, Act Like an Agency started, and that's where we help evolve individuals within teams, from tacticians to trusted advisors. That was 2009 when we started that, and the same challenges exist today, more than 10 years. So, and what I think AI has done, it's really brought all of this to light, because AI's commoditized tactical work, right? It's made writing and generating images and a bunch of stuff much easier and faster to do. And if you as a communicator were taking pride and showing value by doing that, now you are literally forced to up level and say, okay, now how do I provide value to my organization? So, that has kind of forced a lot of people to change. And so now we've got to look at how do communicators provide value to the organization, to their teams, to their boss. And, AI is very good at certain things, but communicators are great at, judgment, critical thinking, negotiation, selling and ideas. There's all these other things that aren't really taught in school and aren't taught, and you don't typically just learn them along the way. So some things have changed, but definitely a lot has been the same.
I think, Brad, from my perspective, maybe some of the things that I think haven't changed and that people forget is I constantly remind people that the importance of repetition in communication. It's not about every day thinking up something new. If you're trying to drive a program in a company, if you're trying to drive some change, then you have to understand that people, they may hear it, but they're not listening, or they're listening, but they're not hearing. So you have to hit people through repetition, through using different channels. I don't think that the channel might change. There might today be TikTok or whatever, but it's that understanding that you've got to have robust messaging, and just keep on repeating it. I think the other one is, I wrote it down here, is the human touch. The best communication still works on human engagement and trust, especially within a company. People trust their managers before they trust head office, if you work in a decentralized setup. So you can do lots of fancy digital communication. Somewhere in there, though, you have to keep building in. And when people realize, or when people have the perception that executive management are very busy and they're very important, when executive management shows up on the shop floor and actually spends real time talking to the staff, that has an impact much more than an email or a video that you send out. So you've got to blend the new, but you can't forget the old. And then I think the other issue is that probably is becoming even more important, is you actually have to understand what the real issue is that the person you're trying to help with communication, whether it's a client, maybe as an agency, or in a corporate environment, some divisional heads. What's the real issue that they're trying to deal with? Have you done your homework? Have you taken the effort to understand their business when you go and talk to them about that? Because then they can see that you're understanding where their concern is, and what you're trying to offer them has a link to that. You're not just trying to offer some standard solutions. So to me, those are the things where the channels might change, how you create content might change. But if some of those fundamentals, if you've forgotten those, then you're not going to connect, and then they think you can be replaced by an agency, by AI, or by some other tool that they can just do themselves at night.
I love what you're all talking about, and I heard it's people. Don't forget about individuals. The repetition is important. In fact, I remember one time sort of learning this. Don't keep coming up with new things to say. Come up with new ways to say the same thing. So you are on message and you're repeating, but it's not totally verbatim. Repeating. And Diana, you talked about the students you're working with, and let's think for a second about that next generation of communications professionals. And if there's one thing, a contribution that you could see them sort of collectively making to our field, what's the hope for? Where's it going? What do you think that they'll be able to do that, maybe they can teach us before we all hang things up?
Well, I always look at education as I learn as much from them as I teach them. Like it is very much a two-way path. I love going into the classroom for that. I love the energy and the excitement that they bring to the class. Because of the curiosity that they come with, and their willingness to always challenge assumptions. Because goodness knows there's no shortage of that on any given day that I'm in the classroom with them. What they do remind me is that communication is constantly evolving, and the way that, as we were just talking about, the methods that we use and that we've done in the past, the vehicles, the tools, compared to what they're using now. And so always checking in with them and seeing getting them off their freaking phones for a class is next to impossible, right? So, and actually having to literally almost every class saying, please put your phones down, so that you get the eyes on, if there are students presenting at the front of the class, so that they will actually pay attention to what's going on in the classroom. But what I do find is that one of the biggest problems right now in the classrooms is the level of the need to build their confidence. There is such a level of anxiety in the students today that is unbelievable. And COVID has something to do with that, the learning that they've had to go through, the way they've had to learn, and now what we're seeing as a result of that. And I've seen that because of the work that I do in the accessibility centers. I do proctoring in the University of Guelph and in the Conestoga College accessibility centers, and the sheer volume of numbers and students that are actually coming through those centers has increased incredibly over the last 5 years. And it's the students that have now, students who never took an exam live before and then actually had to do taking of exams. They were unable to do it in live situations. And so the transition for them was crazy. So having to teach that confidence and teaching ethical grounding to a lot of the students, and having those kinds of conversations with them and teaching them about ethics in business. And what does that mean? And what does that look like? And how you include that into programs and making sure, because in today's world, where is ethics? Where are we seeing it on a day-to-day basis and having those conversations? And so one of the things that I was doing was bringing IABC ethics and standards and actually putting it into my assignments and making them actually have to build that into the assignments that they were submitting. And then having those conversations in the classrooms. It actually was such an interesting process. But the excitement, the willingness to try new things, to, look at different ways of doing things, and to challenge just because that's the way it's been done, doesn't mean we have to keep doing it that way. Right? Why do I have to do it like that? Because that's what we do, right? Like, it's like, you have to write an assignment. You have to put, well, why? And sometimes you stop and think, well, that's a good point. Why do you have to do it that way? And having those kinds of discussions. So, I think that we're going to see more and more of that in the business world, because they are going to challenge a lot of the preconceived notions. And we have seen that. We have seen that in the business world, right? Is that necessarily always a good thing? Not so sure about that. But it opens up discussions, right?
Yeah. I think from as you were asking the question and as Diana was talking, I suppose the one thing is that I've seen is, they've challenged formality for the sake of formality. Sometimes I wonder, when we were these students, there were things that irritated us, and maybe those things that irritated us have now been solved, but now there are things that irritate the new us, and now we're having to deal with that. And so how do you understand where the value is that you can still bring? And I want to go back to something that Cyrus said about asking questions about 2 steps ahead, because I think that is what we can bring to them, is saying to them, okay, well, let's look at a situation, and then going, but what if, okay, what's next, and taking them through to a longer journey of actually unpacking these things so that they can understand that what might seem like a short-term solution, or why should I practice this? Why should I do this? Why should I be exposed to this? That they actually understand that the time horizon is not, they live in an instant world, but consequences and reality is much, much longer. And they need to be able to prepare for that.
Yeah, I think those are great points, Andre. And Diana, I think, what you were saying about their curiosity and challenging norms and structure. And I think that's, one of the big values that they're bringing is making, asking questions of why, and sometimes it deserves a rethink. And, reviewing what you're doing today just because you did it yesterday is always a good thing. There's, I think, the learning, and from my teaching at University of Toronto and studying a new certificate there, absolutely, when you're teaching, it's very two-way beneficial. I'm learning just as much or more from students than they are from me. So it's a great thing to do.
Now, you're all brand new IABC fellows, but this isn't your first IABC touch point. If you could sort of think back, how has IABC, the association, or maybe others, to be fair, sort of helped you with your own growth? And are there opportunities that maybe other members or future members don't see the value of an association and what it can do for them in their careers?
I would say I was introduced into IABC when I joined SAPI by one of my staff members. He was a very strong member, entered Gold Quills, and through him I became exposed, went to conferences, and sort of stayed in the stream. For me, I think the issue is that if you're ever going to be a successful communicator or build a career in communication, you have to be fundamentally curious. It's not just about 9 to 5. It's not just about what am I supposed to do now. You fundamentally have to be curious about the world around you, about the field you're in, connecting with people and learning. And that will then introduce you into the field. What I have found over the years to be phenomenally valuable is volunteering as a judge for quills and for some other competitions, some communication competitions. You get to see, you learn how the judging is done. Then you get to see entries from around the world, and then you get to look through stuff, and you get to see good and bad, and you get to judge yourself and what you do against all of this. It's been the most phenomenal learning school. And then going through certification, which again was through the IABC, and having to study for certification and realizing where the gaps are, with the stuff that you don't touch on a daily basis that you need to brush up on. But really, I would just say that an association makes logical sense, because if you're curious, you want to know more, you want to meet more people. Outside of that, you're reading stuff, you're looking at reports, whether it's a trend report or whatever. And for me, that's how the IABC has just been tremendously valuable. If I just sat in my corporate role and I didn't have that exposure, I would be worse than a dinosaur.
I totally agree with where you're going about curiosity. My personal mantra is be able, always be learning and evolving. And we should always be doing that regardless of the pace of change. And I think it's easy to join an organization and you may get some value out of it in any organization. And even with IBC, you will get some value if you go to some PD sessions and so forth. But the real magic happens when you invest your time and volunteer. The challenge is, as Andre, you talked about, the waiting for the value. There's a bit of a time gap, right? You invest and then the value comes, but the value is there, whether you're investing in judging awards, evaluating awards, whether you're investing as a mentor in your chapter or sitting on a chapter board or just being a director and helping out a director on a board or on a project or something like that. That's where the value comes and the connections come. I think everyone on this call could list, 30 countries where they know IABC members that they could just pick up the phone and ask a question or go out to dinner if they're there or what have you. So I think joining an association like IABC is one step, but to really reap the benefit is you need to invest time. And it seems like an upfront investment, but you'll quickly learn that if you invest 10 minutes, you get 100 minutes back in additional value. So it's really a no-brainer. And that's why I think we all continue to volunteer today with IBC.
I'm going to jump in as well and say, I think for me, I got more out of my IABC membership the more involved I was. And one of the biggest things for me, as Andre was saying, is I have throughout the years been an active evaluator for the awards shows throughout North America and being involved in Gold Quills. And I've been involved in IBC since I think it was 1998 when I became a member. And I became a member actually because I had joined a new agency, and I had actually said to my boss, would you pay for me to join the associations? And he said, well, I'm a CPRS member, so I'm going to sign you up for IABC. And that's how I became an IABC member. And I've been involved ever since. And I got a call. I had put out that I would actually love to become involved and do something. And I got a call from the then president who said, would you take on doing the Ovation Awards, which is the Toronto chapter one? We need somebody to do it. We don't have anybody doing it at the local chapter. So I had just joined. I wasn't doing anything. And all of a sudden I'm doing the chapter awards. I was thrown in right off the bat. And that was my hello and welcome to IABC. And it hadn't been done. And there's nothing like putting on an award show for people in the industry who actually do events. So, and I then went on to the board after that. I got more out of my membership whenever I actually volunteered and did something. I felt more connected. I felt more involved. I felt more in tune. I met more people when I was actually doing something. There were a number of years when there was a lot going on in my private life, and I actually felt a need to step back a little bit, and I really felt disconnected from what was going on. And all you have to do is actually look at LinkedIn with the most recent conference just finishing and seeing all the discussions going on and all the people connecting with each other and talking, and and you realize what it brings to your life. You realize the connections. This business is about relationships. It is about people. It is about, it truly, truly is about the relationships between people. That is what we do in our industry. And that is what IABC brings to you. And that's what I've told my students. I have actually recommended to students that they join, and reached out to IABC to find out if there was still an IABC student membership and all of those types of things. I recommended to them that they do sign up, because, well, what better time than when you were a student? And I've had a number of students actually sign up that way, because it's a great way to network, and it's a great way to start learning and, attending meetings and those types of things, and getting information about what's going on in our field.
You've hit upon a really important part. I think all of you have sort of said it in different ways, the networking, the people, the connections. The one thing you didn't quite get to was that there are job opportunities involved with that sort of stuff. If you prove what it is that you're doing through volunteer roles in IABC, it may get noticed. I actually used IABC's job center, job line at the time it was called, to get a really amazing job that moved me from sort of the early career stages. I was working in central Illinois, right in the middle of the United States, and got a promotion, move, and everything else to a company called Hewlett Packard, which was just an amazing jump. And the person who hired me said it was your involvement in IABC that put you ahead of other candidates for the job. So I love that. And then I will also say that I have used IABC to find people when I've been fortunate enough to have an opening on my staff. I will look at people that I have met through IABC who've proven themselves that they're doing some great stuff in their work life, but they're also really good at being able to do things for an association in their spare time. So those are all great. Let me sort of turn things and just sort of say, let's look at sort of an accomplishment that you had in your career at some point that made you feel like, maybe I really do belong in this profession. It's feeding me as much, if not more, than what I'm getting. So, what was that pivotal moment, that aha, yeah, I got it. This is where I belong.
You're asking modest people. So.
But outgoing people too, and thoughtful people too. I understand.
I have to say, going through this process of putting the fellow nomination together really, made me stop, because I actually self-nominated. And so I did the work of putting all the work everything together. And it made me stop and look over everything that I had done in my career to do that. And it was a bit of a wide opening or an eye opening exercise, because you look back. We don't do that. We do not look back over our careers enough, as we were, especially at this point in our career. We've got years behind us at this point. And you look over and I actually remember thinking to myself, girl, you've done some stuff. Holy cow here. I mean, I'm really proud of a lot of the stuff that I've done. And especially when I started my own company in 2001, and I did it because I got laid off and decided to go out on my own at that point. And, you know, so I was doing things on my own and creating these programs on my own. And I'm very, very proud of, and part of that was because I created programs that actually, you know, won IABC awards and created real business results for my clients. If I had to pick just, oh my God, how do you pick just one? You know, I launched Beyonce's fashion line in Canada for her, you know, for a girl from Guelph sitting at home in her basement. Holy crap. You know, that's pretty freaking awesome. Like, wow. I mean, I can look up on the wall and I've got a picture of me with Beyonce, her mom, and her sister. You know, that's not something I ever thought I was going to be doing, right? So,
and none of us have that same picture with Beyonce and her mom or anybody else.
You know,
I don't even have a CD of Beyonce.
You know, so yeah, I'm standing right next to her with her arm around me. So, and I worked my freaking butt off to make that happen. And I think I sold my soul to the devil to make it happen, quite frankly. And he's going to come, and there's going to be a knock on the door someday and someone's going to come to collect it, but it hasn't happened yet. So, you know, that was pretty monumental. That was pretty I had 3.5 weeks over the August 1st long weekend to pull that off too, which is the time when the industry in Toronto shuts down. So that was pretty monumental.
Interesting. I think, I mean, I've had the opportunity to be involved in the democratic change in South Africa in the 90s through 94 and beyond that. You know, and making small contributions, you know, in that sense. Working with some fantastic people. Where I am now, it's about I've launched a few programs, and I think sometimes it's about, if you believe that something is worth doing, you also need to have the patience to see it. To find the right time. Sometimes the time is not right when you have a good idea. But if you truly believe it's going to add value to the company, it's going to add value to the community where you're trying to build relations, that it's actually going to benefit, then you wait until the time is right, and then you launch it. You don't just jump from one idea to the next because the time wasn't right. I think, again, the same thing, putting, you know, when I was approached by someone who was probably a bit of a mentor to me, who said, no, she wants to put me forward, and but I need to, you know, do my CV. I think it took me 3 months of preparing and doing all the detail, and then waking up in the middle of the night and saying, oh, I forgot, I didn't put that in the document, and then going back and adding it. And that went on for quite a while, because it was just never important to sort of keep a score sheet. You do, you get your value, you get your pleasure and appreciation from seeing good work, from seeing good results. You forget to write it up on a scorecard, because that's not what it's about. So I think that was actually just that exercise alone of looking back over everything you've done was actually quite invigorating.
Well, and you did make the point earlier on, Ray, that we often tend to work, we're humble people, but we also tend to work behind the scenes. And so sometimes the being in the spotlight or being on camera when you're making the stuff happen is an uncomfortable feeling. Cyrus, what about your...
That was a nice tee up there, Brad, because very early in my career, I was put in front of the camera and talking about air quality and respiratory health on Toronto news stations. And I thought to myself, how can some kid with a couple years out of university be the expert to the largest city in Canada talking about health issues and air quality and so on? And that got me interested in public relations, in communications, because I thought, how did I get here? Like, what kind of machine was drumming up something to put me in this position? So that's what got me interested. And I think, what I love to see, and I do a lot of, whether it's teaching or speaking or training, it's the feedback. It's seeing those sparks going on in people's eyes and having them ask questions that they didn't even consider before they came into the room. That's keeps reminding me why I do what I do, because it's not about the impact. And we've done a lot of great things for clients across North America, but when you see an individual change and think differently and get excited or start thinking about, oh, this could happen if we did this, and the wheels turning, that's really what excites me and keeps me going.
Oh, these are all great answers, and I've loved spending time with you. I've got one more question to ask before we wrap it up, and also you will be invited back to be part of the Circle of Fellows, to be able to impart wisdom. Generally, our topics are a little bit more focused, and they might involve something about ethics, or maybe something about AI and trends. So expect to be called upon regularly as part of your duties as a fellow, and also the continued contributions to the profession, sharing some of the insight. And so maybe we can end with a question that's sort of like it's like, what do you know now that you wish you'd known like 25 years ago? Got everybody thinking. And that gets back to we sometimes don't pay a whole lot of attention to what it is that happened 25 years ago, because that's not as relevant as the stuff we're working on today, and the thinking 2 steps ahead that Cyrus remembered for us.
You know what? A lot of value yourself. When I came out of journalism school, and I went and started working for a big agency. It was a small PR component of a big multi-agency, and I got taken advantage of big time. And I think, as I said before, a lot of it, there was no work-life balance. There was no, you sold your soul to get a job. And I think we're seeing that again now, because it's so very hard to get jobs in this industry. And it always has been. It's always been incredibly competitive. And we are at the whims of our clients. We are at the whims of our bosses. We are at the whims of this life. Although, work-life balance is better now than it ever was. But I worked incredibly long hours. I worked 80-hour days, and it was stupid, the kinds of stuff that I did. And I remember actually when I went out on my own, people actually had asked my ex-husband, what's it like with her working? He said, at least now, he said, she's still working the same kind of hours but at least she's in the bedroom across the hall and not in some downtown Toronto parking lot at midnight, making her way home type of thing. And I think it's kind of recognizing that, it's always, when I do these, that the business of living is living and not business, right? And and understanding that life is important, and that don't give everything to that thing that is called business, because far too many people don't make it all the way to the end. And that it is about relationships. It is about the relationships with your family. It is about the relationships, yes, with work, but it is too transactional, especially nowadays. And that you need to remember to keep yourself safe in this process.
I would echo that. Coming out of I suppose a workaholic family, that's how you do things. Looking back, yes, there were, if a person had a little bit more awareness, small adjustments in your life would have freed up more personal time with the family. But on a professional level, it's been a fantastic, fun ride, and I'm not sure I would sort of think, oh, well, there's something that I should have done differently, or that I could tell myself now to go back and do. But definitely the work-life balance. But there again, I think sometimes today the sense is that it's life first and then work. Well, as long as people can balance their books. But I get back to, if you're not passionate about this isn't a 9-to-5 job. This is something you invest yourself in. You never switch off. You never stop being curious. You never stop wanting to learn. But it's how you just balance the hours with it.
You gotta love what you do. Cyrus.
Yes, I am still, I'm still learning how to balance those. And my kids, remind me sometimes. But I think, as someone starting their career, it's ask those questions, even if you think everyone else knows it in the room, because they don't. Always ask questions, be curious. And for someone who's more senior, I was just in a mentor engagement, and this woman said, I'm the shortest and the youngest in the room. And I said, so, like, you know how tall Prince is? You know how tall Madonna is? They're like 5'1", 5'2". They're pretty powerful. So just, believe in yourself. And if you've got decades of experience, don't feel that comms is here and somehow, leaders are up here. Everyone puts on their pants one leg at a time. That's what a CEO of one of the big banks in Canada told me. And it's true, right? He was trying to connect with his employees, and he just and used that, and then that kind of broke down some barriers. But it's just believe in yourself, because communicators, we've got so much value to offer, and sometimes we're just too quiet or shy. So that's kind of a couple pieces of advice I'd be giving.
Yeah, maybe Brad, if I could just add there,
please.
That people must be careful of the imposter syndrome. There's a reason people gave you the job you're in. They see opportunity, they see talent, they see the potential. And communicators are in a very unique role in any organization, in that we don't only have one silo to look after. We work right across the organization, and we work across all levels of seniority. And people are looking to their communicators to have that confidence, to be measured. So there is a bit of a challenge. You've got to think more strategically, but you have the opportunity. You were appointed into your role because of that, so it's yours to lose.
I think that's sound counsel. This has been really a great hour, and we actually did get some great feedback from a fan of yours now, a IABC fellow. Cindy Schmieg said, congratulations to all of you from your stories, your contributions to the profession. it's why you're a fellow. And I think that that's going to keep on coming. So I appreciate you guys joining me for this one, and I'll probably be seeing you in this forum and others down the road. A reminder that these are 3 of our new 5 fellows. The other 2 fellows, Sia Papagiorgio and Catherine Ducharme, are going to be joining Shell Holtz for episode 130 of IABC's Circle of Fellows. Realize that if we do these 12 times a year, that 130, we're doing this, and then keep on doing it and showing some tremendous value. I want to give a big thanks to Anna Willey, an IABC fellow who manages to get us all together at least once, sometimes twice a month for these recordings. A big thanks to Cyrus and Andre and Diana for being able to join me. And also a big thanks to everybody in our audience for joining us either live or watching this as part of the collection of wisdom from IABC fellows that we share all the time. We will see you again very, very soon, and hang in there, and we'll see you very soon.